Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth, with your host, the Green Bard. This is Dany's Dragon Bonds, Volume 2, Part 2, 3 Dragons, 3 Walls. Continuing our investigation of Dany and her dragons in A Clash of Kings as they enter Qarth. A Clash of Kings, Daenerys 2. Qarth is presented to Dany as another world, ancient and modern at the same time. It is interesting that the architecture includes dragons. How old are those depictions? Could it possibly predate Valyria? Dany continues to alternate which dragon remains in her presence. The dragon on her shoulder as they enter the city is Drogon, the largest and most impressive. We see the high society of the Qarthine elite and nobility, which Dany contrasts with the more savage Dothraki, a trait shared with the dragons. In this volume, an awestruck Dany doesn't yet dwell on slavery, the ugly underbelly of Qarthine culture. Our author reserves that for Slaver's Bay in the next volume.
The Qarthine lined the streets and watched from delicate balconies that looked too frail to support their weight. They were tall, pale folk, in linen and samite and tiger fur, every one a lord or lady to her eyes. The women wore gowns that left one breast bare, while the men favored beaded silk skirts. Dany felt shabby and barbaric as she rode past them in her lion-skin robe, with black Drogon on one shoulder. Her Dothraki called the Qarthine milkmen for their paleness, and Khal Drogo had dreamed of the day where he might sack the great cities of the east. She glanced at her blood riders, their dark, almond-shaped eyes giving no hint of their thoughts. Is it only the plunder they see? She wondered. How savage we must seem to these Qarthine.
Flattery and political grift are also themes in Qarth, as Dany's moniker of Mother of Dragons is used by flatterers and her own followers several times in this and the next chapter while navigating Qarth. Warning her of these flatterers is Quaithe. In the previous encounter, her only words were to say that they came seeking dragons. She is very mysterious in this meeting, telling Dany to beware, and elaborating as follows.
Of all, they shall come day and night to see the wonder that has been born again to the world, and when they see, they shall lust. For dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power.
The idea of dragons being fire-made flesh is mentioned for the first time here. It is later repeated twice in Dany chapters early in A Dance with Dragons, as well as in her final chapter of that volume, while she is struggling with her purpose and her identity. It is safe to say that fire-made flesh is an important part of dragon lore. Indeed, the second mention says that Dany already learned it from the book Jorah had given her at her wedding. My take from this line is that fire magic is part of what constitutes a dragon. They are beings of fire magic. This fits my theory about Dany's magical healing in her second dragon dream in A Game of Thrones. It also fits my theory that, through the bond, Dany draws magical strength from Drogon. Dany is perplexed, though, that Quaithe is so mysterious and opaque. Consequently, she doesn't trust her. Given that we learn later in The World of Ice and Fire that Quaithe is likely part of the mysterious Church of Starry Wisdom, a faith started by the Bloodstone Emperor, a personage implicated in causing the Long Night, she may be right to not trust her. In any case, Dany's first instinct is to protect her dragons.
I do not understand her. Piot and Jarro had showered Dany with promises from the moment they first glimpsed her dragons, declaring themselves her loyal servants in all things. But from Quaithe, she had gotten only the rare cryptic word, and it disturbed her that she had never seen the woman's face. Remember Mir Mazdur, she told herself. Remember treachery. She turned to her blood riders. We will keep our own watch so long as we are here. See that no one enters this wing of the palace without my leave, and take care that the dragons are always well guarded.
Speaking of treachery, Dany later worries that her dragons will not be enough to conquer Westeros. She is still determined to do so, and has been since the death of Viserys and the attempt on her life in Vaes Dothrak. Now, she learns, though, that the man who sent that murderer, Robert, is dead. In the scene, Dany feeds her dragons. It seems a running theme in this volume that she always has at least one dragon in her company. In this case, it is all of them.
It was near evenfall, and Dany was feeding her dragons when Eyre stepped through the silken curtains to tell her that Ser Jorah had returned from the docks, and not alone. "Send him in, with whomever he has brought," she said, curious. When they entered, she was seated on a mound of cushions, her dragons all about her. The man he brought with him wore a cloak of green and yellow feathers, and had skin as black as polished jet. "Your Grace," the knight said, "I bring you Kuhuru Mo, captain of the Cinnamon Wind, out of Tall Trees Town."
When she is told of Robert's death, Drogon has a direct reaction, hissing. I think this is likely mirroring. Could this be a reflection of Dany wishing to have killed him herself? Vengeance is sometimes part of her character. Then again, being at the top of the food chain, dragons are aggressive by nature. Dany will have to manage her vengeful instincts, especially feelings she gets mirrored through the bond to Drogon. In this scene, Drogon is in her lap, so if our study of direwolves is analogous, her bond to Drogon ought to be heightened by their physical contact. Also mentioned is Viserion's reaction, to flap his wings from her shoulder. It seems a happy gesture, which fits, as Viserys would have been overjoyed at the usurper's demise.
"A gift of news, Dragon Mother, Stormborn. I tell you true, Robert Baratheon is dead." Outside her walls, dusk was settling over Qarth, but a sun had risen in Dany's heart. "Dead?" she repeated. In her lap, black Drogon hissed, and pale smoke rose before her face like a veil. "You are certain? The usurper is dead?" "So it is said in Old Town, and Dorne, and Lys, and all the other ports where we have called. He sent me poisoned wine, yet I live, and he is gone. What was the manner of his death?" On her shoulder, pale Viserion, flapped wings the color of cream, stirring the air.
After that, we also get Rhaegal's reaction, only to observe. Note that Dany is in physical contact with all three dragons at this moment. We know that her nascent bond to Drogon is already formed, but it may be that her parent-child bonds to Rhaegal and Viserion also include mirroring.
Beneath Dany's gentle fingers, green Rhaegal stared at the stranger with eyes of molten gold. When his mouth opened, his teeth gleamed like black needles. "When does your ship return to Westeros, Captain?"
It must be a sight to see her with all three dragons, per the ship's captain, when Dany offers her a reward.
His eyes gleamed. "I have seen dragons."
Despite the denial of vengeance, Robert's death reinforces Dany's trajectory. The disarray in Westeros clearly excites her. It is mirrored in Drogon, as he half flies up a lintel, while the others try to fly at floor level.
"This changes everything," Dany rose abruptly. Screeching, her dragons uncoiled and spread their wings. Drogon flapped and clawed up the lintel over the archway. The others skittered across the floor, wingtips scrabbling on the marble. "Before, the 7 kingdoms were like my Drogo's Khalasar, 100,000 made as one by his strength. Now they fly to pieces, even as the Khalasar did after my Khal lay dead."
Dragons are invoked 2 more times in this chapter in her discussion with Jorah. In one instance, she compared her age to that of her dragons, while returning to the mantra that she is blood of the dragon.
"I am not the frightened girl you met in Pentos. I have counted only 15 name days, true, but I am as old as the crones in the Dash Khaleen, and as young as my dragons, Jorah. I have borne a child, burned a Khal, and crossed the red waste in the Dothraki Sea. Mine is the blood of the dragon."
In the final mention, Jorah counsels caution, but Dany's blood is on fire.
"No," he admitted. "There's more of Rhaegar in you, I think. But even Rhaegar could be slain. Robert proved that on the Trident with no more than a warhammer. Even dragons can die." "Dragons die." She stood on her toes to kiss him lightly on an unshaven cheek. "But so do dragon slayers."
There is an ominous note in that last bit, both in Dany's aggressive response and in the fact that to be a dragon slayer, you arguably need to first slay a dragon. This may not end well. A Clash of Kings, Daenerys 3. This chapter continues the politics of Qarth and Dany's closeness to her dragons. Rhaegal accompanies her to a meeting with the Pureborn, the old power of this city. We join her and Xaro in a closed palanquin as she traverses the city from the meeting after they rejected her pleas for help in conquering Westeros. Rhaegal does seem to be mirroring her to some degree, as he's digging his claws into her shoulder. It's also an indication that the dragons are growing. In a bit of humor, Dany seems to be hitting the bottle to drown her sorrows.
Rhaegal hissed and dug sharp black claws into her bare shoulder as Dany stretched out a hand for the wine. Wincing, she shifted him to her other shoulder, where he could claw her gown instead of her skin.
The rejection stings because she's been used. They just wanted to see her dragon. Yet she uses her mantra and identity as blood of the dragon as a cloak of dignity and source of fortitude for her convictions.
They came because they were curious. They came because they were bored, and the dragon on my shoulder interested them more than I did.
Later.
The blood of the dragon does not weep, she said testily.
She considers the aid that she has gotten through the merchant Xaro. He is not much different from Illyrio, who had sold her at the beginning of her story. So that is cause for concern, but he has been an ally so far, sheltering her and helping her to earn some coin and possessions through her dragons.
She would have been lost without Xaro. The gold that she had squandered to open the doors of the Hall of 1,000 Thrones was largely a product of the merchant's generosity and quick wit. As the rumor of living dragons had spread through the East, ever more seekers had come to learn if the tale was true, and Xaro Joan Daxos saw to it that the great and the humble alike offered some token to the mother of dragons.
Literally, the crown jewel of her possessions gained from the exposition of the dragons is her crown. It is fitting that it matched her dragons and is also the Targaryen sigil.
And the Tourmaline Brotherhood pressed on her a crown wrought in the shape of a 3-headed dragon. The coils were yellow gold, the wings silver, the heads carved from jade, ivory, and onyx.
I do wonder if the Tourmaline Brotherhood is somehow tied back to the Tourmaline Emperor, whom I hypothesize to be among the ancestors that Dany saw in a dream/vision in A Game of Thrones. Dany goes on to think that all this still amounts to charity, making her a bigger king, much like her brother, but she draws conviction from her dragons. The passage goes on to show that Rhaegal is again mirroring her mood while nipping at her hand.
No, that is defeat. I have something Viserys never had. I have the dragons. The dragons are all the difference. She stroked Rhaegal. The green dragon closed his teeth around the meat of her hand and nipped hard. Outside, the great city murmured and thrummed and seethed, all its myriad voices blending into one low sound, like the surge of the sea. Make way, you milkmen. Make way for the mother of dragons.
Rhaegal may be sensing that Dany is getting drunk a bit. I can't think of any other reason that he would hiss at the wine, unless the hiss was for its provider, Xaro. The affectionate bite is reminiscent of the affection we see with the direwolves. Xaro, as we mentioned earlier, is another flatterer, though a more useful one than most. Still, he has designs on her, but Dany is wary.
As Dany lifted her goblet to drink, Rhaegal sniffed at the wine and drew his head back, hissing. Your dragon has a good nose. Xaro wiped his lips. The wine is ordinary. It is said that across the Jade Sea they make a golden vintage so fine that one sip makes all other wines taste like vinegar. Let us take my pleasure barge and go in search of it, you and I.
She deflects him while we see another piece of affection from Rhaegal.
I mean to sail to Westeros and drink the wine of vengeance from the skull of the usurper. She scratched Rhaegal under one eye, and his jade-green wings unfolded for a moment, stirring the still air in the palanquin.
After she leaves Xaro's presence, she takes counsel from Jorah. Now Drogon is the dragon that takes center stage, and for the rest of this volume. Notably, Drogon has been present for all her interaction with the Night. This may be important later. Either way, as Drogon looks on beside her, Jorah explains that Xaro's marriage proposal above comes with the caveat that she'd need to give him one of her possessions, assuredly one of the dragons. Remember, though, dragons are not slaves, nor are they possessions.
Xaro assures me that in Qarth, men and women each retain their own property after they are wed. The dragons are mine. She smiled as Drogon came hopping and flapping across the marble floor to crawl up on the cushion beside her.
Amidst more warnings from Jorah, we get two simultaneous dragon interactions. First, Drogon is hot against her body, emanating heat to her, almost certainly an indication of the bond as it was when he was an egg. At the same time, the other two are playing as children. The scene further cements my theory that Drogon, paired with her, has always been her mount, even possibly her equal, while Viserion and Rhaegal are her children, destined to part from her company, to leave the nest, likely with other riders.
The name Targaryen still frightens them, so much so that they sent a man to murder you when they heard you were with child. What will they do when they learn of your dragons? Drogon was curled up beneath her arm, as hot as a stone that has soaked all day in the blazing sun. Rhaegal and Viserion were fighting over a scrap of meat, buffeting each other with their wings as smoke hissed from their nostrils. My furious children, she thought, they must not come to harm.
After this, Dany decides to visit the Undying Ones, having not received what she wishes from Xaro and the Merchants, the Tourmaline Brotherhood, the Pureborn, or any other faction. We'll cover that in the next episode. Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider